Welcome to Stuff They Didn't Teach Me in Sunday School.
There are a lot of ways somebody can get in trouble. Rarely do you get in trouble by doing something nice or something good. As we continue our look at Mark this week, you're going to see Jesus get in trouble for doing something good. And he's going to get in trouble twice. There was a rabbinical teaching in Jesus' era that there was a reason that Messiah wasn't coming. And the reason the rabbis said that Messiah wasn't coming was because of the people's disobedience. If the people were more obedient, God would send Messiah. In fact, some rabbis said the main law that people are disobeying just out of hand is the Sabbath law. So if you could get, some rabbis said, if you could get all of Israel to keep 2 Sabbaths in a row, God would be so impressed that Messiah would come. All they had to do was keep 2 in a row and Messiah would come. File that one away for a minute. We'll come back to it. Verse 23 of chapter 2, on the Sabbath, he was going through the grain fields, and as they made their way, his disciples began to pluck ears of grain. And the Pharisees said to him, "Look, why are they doing what's not lawful on the Sabbath?" Okay, what's not lawful about this on the Sabbath? Well, number one, you couldn't harvest on the Sabbath. I don't know if you've ever been on a farm, but if you've been out in a wheat field, and this is, as a kid, I used to do this on my grandfather's farm. You take the wheat head and just strip it up your hand, and you're going to have a whole bunch of wheat kernels in the chaff in your hand. And then if you rub your hand together, blow the chaff off, what you're left with is the kernels of wheat. You can pop them in your mouth, and it's like eating kind of sweet nuts. However, the law prohibited harvesting on the Sabbath, which was what they would be doing by stripping the heads, and it prohibited preparing food on the Sabbath, which is what they were doing by rubbing the wheat together, blowing the chaff off. So the Pharisees, kind of keeping an eye on Jesus by now, say, "Why are you letting your disciples break the law?" He said to them, "Have you never read what David did when he was in need and was hungry, he and those who were with him, how he entered the house of God when Abiathar was high priest?" Actually, Ahimelech was high priest, but Abiathar was his son. "And ate the bread of the presence, which it's not lawful for anyone but priests to eat, and also gave it to those who were with him." He said to them, key idea, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. He points out the ridiculousness of their position, that somehow God would have said, "I'm going to make a Sabbath. Okay, I got a Sabbath, now what do I do with it? Oh yeah, I better make some people to keep it." No, it's the other way around. He made people and said, these people will work themselves crazy if I don't have them set aside one day each week to not work and to focus on me. And so the Sabbath was made for man's benefit. He said, so the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath, and he exerts his own authority over that Sabbath law, and especially their application of the Sabbath law. Chapter 3, verse 1, again he entered the synagogue, and I'm going to suggest to you that this is the next Sabbath. Again he entered the synagogue, and a man was there who had a withered hand, and they watched him to see whether he would heal him on the Sabbath, so that they might accuse him. Now, the Old Testament law said don't do work on the Sabbath. Their definitions of the law said you could do emergency medical work on the Sabbath, but you couldn't do elective medical work on the Sabbath. And their logic went with this guy, his hand been withered since he was born, he could wait another day. He didn't have to get healed on Saturday. That would break the Sabbath. Jesus said to the man who had the withered hand, "Come here." And he said to them, "Is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do harm or to save life or kill?" Well, it's a trick question, and they recognize it. They're silent. He looked around at them with anger, grieved at their hardness of their heart, and said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He stretched it out, and his hand was restored, and the Pharisees went out and immediately held counsel with the Herodians against him, how to destroy him. Whoa! Did you get that last part? The Pharisees immediately went out and immediately held counsel with the Herodians against him, how to destroy him. Mark chapter 3, after breaking 2 Sabbaths in a row, they're ready to kill him. already in Mark chapter 3. Why? I think you go back to where we started with this particular lesson. That the rabbinical teaching was that if all of Israel would keep 2 Sabbaths in a row, Messiah would come back. In their minds, not only was Jesus not the Messiah, he was preventing Messiah from coming and teaching others to do the same. And because he was preventing Messiah from coming, he was expendable. He had to go. So the death sentence in Mark's gospel comes already in Mark chapter 3. The next story is one that you're very familiar with. My boys loved this story as kids. I'm really not sure why it appealed to them so much. But it's the story of casting out an unclean spirit. Verse 7, Jesus withdrew with his disciples to the sea, and a great multitude from Galilee followed, also from Judea and Jerusalem and Idumea, from beyond the Jordan, from Tyre and Sidon, a great multitude. Notice these people are coming from all around now. There's a lot of folks coming to follow him. And he told his disciples to have a boat ready for him because of the crowd, lest they should crush him, for he had healed many, so that all who had diseases pressed upon him to touch him. They're coming all around him. He gets out in a boat. Whenever the unclean spirits beheld him, they fell down before him and cried out, "You are the Son of God." And he strictly ordered them not to make him known. So again, the demons know him. He goes into the hills. He goes off and retreats for a while. We have a list of his disciples in chapter 3, verse 13 and following. He goes back to along the Sea of Galilee in about verse 20. And verse 20, the crowd came together again so that they could not even eat. And when his friends heard it, they went out to seize him, for they said he was beside himself. And the scribes who came down from Jerusalem, now the scribes are coming from Jerusalem even, said he's possessed by Beelzebul, by the devil, and by the prince of demons, and he casts out demons. And Jesus answers, that just doesn't make any sense. He says in verse 23, how can Satan cast out Satan? If a kingdom is divided against itself, that kingdom can't stand. If a house divided against itself, that house will not be able to stand. If you ask most people who said that, they'd attribute it to Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln was quoting Jesus. And if Satan has risen up against himself and is divided, he cannot stand, but it's coming to an end. But no one can enter a strong man's house, a strong man being Satan, and plunder his goods unless he first binds the strong man, then indeed he may plunder his house. Jesus came and bound Satan. Satan's power is not absolute. Satan's power is controlled by Jesus himself. If you skip on over a little bit to chapter 4, verse 33, after a whole series of parables, he takes his disciples aside, and in verse 35, on that day, when evening had come, he said to them, let us go across to the other side. And leaving the crowd, they took with him just as he was in the boat, and other boats were with him. And a great storm of wind arose, and the waves beat in the boat. You know this story, don't you? This is the one my boys loved. They loved this story of this storm coming up on the Sea of Galilee. By the way, the Sea of Galilee is a lake. It's about 7 miles by 14 miles. It's not even a big lake. It's a lake that the biggest thing the Jews would put a boat on, though, because they were afraid of the sea. So they call it Sea of Galilee. And this storm comes up on the lake. The boat is rocked. Jesus is asleep. And in verse 38, they wake him. Teacher, do you not care if we perish? A little sarcasm there. He awoke and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. He said to them, why are you afraid? Have you no faith? And they were filled with awe and said to one another, and here's the question I love, who then is this that even wind and sea obey him? If they know their Old Testament, there is only one who controls nature. There is only one who made nature, and there is only one who absolutely controls it once it's made, and that's God himself. So the answer to their question should be self-evident. Who is this that even the winds and the sea obey him? He is the only one that the winds and sea obey. He is God in the flesh. God in the flesh come to save his people.